Your source for everything paranormal. Para X. The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Merry meet and blessed be, heed the words I call to thee. Honour the old ones in name and deed, hearken not to others' greed. Pray to the moon when she is round, luck with you shall then abound. Respect the earth, the sky, the sea, as you will it, so mote it be. Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron on the Para X Radio Network. And now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Hey, merry meet everybody, and welcome to the show. And an interesting and timely one it'll be. The music you heard in the opener was Midnight Syndicate's Troubled Times. And my guests tonight are Shaheen Miro and Theresa Reed, who are the authors of the book Tarot for Troubled Times. What a great connection that is, huh? And given that things have been happening lately on the really bad side, like the mass shootings, major heat waves, horrific storms back east, and a lot more not so pleasant things going on in our world. That's where the word timely comes in on this show. Now, Shaheen is an intuitive consultant, energy worker, artist, writer, and spiritual nomad. Through intuitive guidance and spiritual cleansing techniques, he helps people transform their lives, concisely manifest their realities, and connect with their spirit. He's the creator of the Lunar Nomad Oracle. And Theresa is the host of the Astrology Bites podcast. She's been a professional full-time astrologer and tarot reader for over 25 years. Her monthly horoscopes and Star School astrology series are two of the most popular features on her online platforms. And she's appeared on numerous podcasts, radio shows, and web TV. I'm very happy to have both of them with us tonight. And for those of you who have any questions or comments for my guests, you need to be in the Para X chat room. And if you're not there already, please pop in over to www.paraxradionetwork.com. So, Theresa, Shaheen, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
And when I throw a question out, you both are going to have to fight over it, okay? Because I'm not going to.
I always let Theresa go first.
Oh, okay. That's a
Unless you want to switch, I can go first this time.
You guys flip a coin. But, when I first opened the book, I was looking at some of the praise for the book in the beginning pages. And Courtney Weber, who's been on the show a couple of times, said something that was put so well that I had to share it, as a matter of fact. She said, in part, that Tarot for Troubled Times is not a book on tarot, but a book on living and a crucial navigational tool for a tumultuous era. And she's right. With the state of the world is where it is right now, many people are just barely keeping their heads above water because we're truly being assaulted with things that we never expected. And the impact of all this discord, this fear, this anxiety is devastating to many. Was there some specific incident that brought up the idea to write this book to begin with, or what's the genesis?
Well, here's how the book came about. Shaheen and I met at a book signing that I was doing in Ohio, and we just hit it off like a house on fire. And at the time, this was the election came not too far after, and we started really talking about some of the things that we were seeing showing up in our offices. And I think I want to preface this by saying one thing: as a tarot reader, I think people assume that when people come in for a tarot reading, that it's all about some tall, dark, handsome stranger coming into your life.
Yes.
And it's not. A lot of times in my tarot table, I'm dealing with a lot of really dark things. I mean, people sometimes come in with heavy things, and often I'm dealing with things like depression and divorce, and now with the epidemic of addiction going on, particularly that's hit my neighborhood hard, dealing with a lot of that. So anyhow, Shaheen and I, after the election, were talking about some of the heavy, heavy things that we were dealing with our clients. And we ended up creating a class called Tarot for Troubled Times to really teach people how to work with the tarot, to maybe, kind of like deal with their own personal shadows and to deal with the way they're showing up in the world and in today's climate. And that ended up leading then to this becoming a book. And Shaheen has been with Wiser, and Wiser actually approached Shaheen and asked if we'd be interested in turning it into a book.
Nice. Yeah. I know a lot of wonderful people at Wiser, like Judica Illes and a few others. So, yeah, they send a lot of books out and have really good authors. And glad they did that because, this is really a needed book. And the goal of the book is to teach people to heal themselves, but also the world. Now, that's a tall order on one hand, but on the other hand, reading through the book, it's not as difficult as one might think, is it?
Well, when we talked about putting this book together, doing a book versus a class was really wonderful because we could add all of this extra information in there. But I think one of the most important things that we bring across in the book is the importance of self-care and how if you're going to deal with the troubled times that we're in, it starts with yourself. It starts with where are you at? What are you feeling? How are you, holding yourself, nurturing yourself? And so in some ways it is a tall order, but it seems very simple when you put it that way, that it just starts with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it has to start because with anything, if we're not good with ourselves, we can't be good to anybody else for any reason. So, that makes a whole lot of sense. Now, because it's a book on tarot, there are a lot of people who are listening who may shy away from the book because they know little or nothing about the tarot, but you don't expect people that are expert tarot readers to be the only ones to reap the benefits of the information that you provide in the book. It's for anyone, and if I'm not mistaken, anybody can pick up that book, whether they know tarot or not, and get a lot out of it.
They can, and actually, there's a lot of things in here that, first of all, are not related to the cards, that are, like Shaheen said, they're things about self-care, et cetera, et cetera. But there is also some really good basic information about tarot, about how to do a reading. So it does give people who may be new to tarot an idea of what tarot's all about, so they can begin exploring it. And oftentimes you just need a gateway before you get into some really good things like tarot or magic or astrology. And for some people, this might be a book that piques their interest around tarot. For other people who are already tarot adept, they might be finding some spreads in here that are useful maybe with their clients and other ways to work with the tarot. So it can work for all levels.
And that, that's the beauty of it. I think people often read something and think, well, I don't know anything about that. I better not get involved. I might feel stupid or something. It's never a bad thing to jump in with both feet and see what you could learn. And this book is not written like a textbook. It's really easy to read. It's really easy to follow. And there are so many interesting things in it that it was kind of one of those things where I was kind of smiling every so often thinking, this is good.
Yeah, we definitely did not want this to be an instruction manual on reading tarot because, like you said, some people are very intimidated by that. Yeah. And yet just a little bit of knowledge about the tarot gives you so much depth. You can go so far with just that little bit when it comes to this topic. So yeah, anybody can jump right into this.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing I want to add to that too is we didn't want it to just be just another tarot instruction manual. I mean, there are lots of tarot instruction manuals. Yeah. We wanted to give people just another way of looking at it, another way of, playing with the cards, different ways to think about it. And also we really wanted to be topical. And I know, for going in and talking about things like shadow work and politics you're kind of going into a little bit of touchy territory, but we thought, again, we don't want it to just be another tarot book. We want to address stuff that's really happening right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And, actually something that I think about when I think about how this book is structured and the way that we take people through the information, it's almost like you're getting to sit in on how our brains work when it comes to doing a reading. I mean, tarot is the door that opens whatever the healing or the recovery process is that we do with people. But we pull, I know for myself, and I know Theresa as well, we pull all sorts of different pieces of information and tools and resources, for our clients one-on-one. And so in this book, that's sort of the approach to it.
Well, there's so many different, when you sit down to start to write a book, there are so many different approaches that you can take. And I imagine collaborating, the two of you, you work well together, you know each other well, but still, I guess I'm not a team player in a way because I think, oh my God, if I have to write a book with somebody, I'd go nuts. But that's just me. But yeah, you have to really sit down and figure out where you're going with this book. And then, when the chemistry is right and you work well together, it just kind of writes itself, doesn't it, in some ways?
Yeah, it really did come together very fluidly. And we know our strengths and our weaknesses. Theresa and I are very good at creating those kind of structures and who's going to flow into what the easiest. So,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, we both had kind of like a really strong understanding of how the other works right off the bat. And, and that really helps a lot when you're going into a collaboration. If you don't know whom you're working with and how they work, it can be a disaster. But we had a very good idea right off the bat, and that made a difference, I think.
Yeah. That's important because it's hard enough to write a book on your own. Much less, with somebody else. So you guys, you melded together beautifully, and it's a very well-written book. Now, the book's broken down into 3 parts. A focus on the personal, where we confront our shadows. A mirror on the self is about the deeper information that the tarot can provide, because tarot holds a mirror up to ourselves. And finally, a focus on the collective, because once we did the inner work, it's time to focus on the world at large. And so you start the journey, appropriately enough, with the Fool, and end the journey with the World. And there's so many wonderful stops along the way. And since we're on borrowed time, I'm going to throw out some bits and pieces that caught my eye that I think are important to touch upon, if that's okay with you. And also like you guys to throw in things that I may be overlooking. Deal?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, the first thing I think we need to start with, a moment ago, you were talking about shadows. Each of us has a shadow that darkens our inner and outer lives, but that's something of a necessary evil because in the duality of life, you can't have light without dark. But I think many people don't realize that we can work with the shadow rather than ignoring it. So let's talk a little bit about the shadow. How do we recognize it, listen to it, learn to work with it? What exactly is it, if there's a better definition than I just gave? And, if we face the dark, we'll be able to find the light, right?
Mm-hmm. So, Shaheen, do you want to tackle that, or should I?
I can go. Yeah,
Okay.
I can talk about it. So, well, what I always say first is that the shadow is the parts of you that are unacknowledged or unloved or unwanted or avoided in some way. And, so we all have shadow. And I think most of the time we are trying to get out of pain or we're trying to get out of discomfort. And that's why we avoid certain things. But, when it comes to looking at life and really looking at the power and the potential that's there, looking at those things that you normally would want to avoid that's where the magic is. And so when we think about what the shadow is specifically, well, it's usually those parts of us that come from an experience of guilt or of shame or of embarrassment. And a lot of times it comes from childhood, and some of it's very benign at first, and then it sort of spirals into, something bigger. And so it could be that, like when I was a little kid, I was always told I talked too much. And I would get in trouble for that all the time. And so I was always really mindful of that, to the point of, as an older teenager, as an adult, I started thinking, am I supposed to speak up now? Am I supposed to talk now? But it could be anything. And a lot of times, I think the things that make us the most unique and the most exciting are those things that we want to avoid, the things that we kind of want to turn away from. And it really is something that we need to befriend and not heal and get rid of.
And also, I want to add to that, too. I think oftentimes you'll see people in spiritual communities doing this love and light thing, where everything's got to be love and light, positive vibes only. And that's not what life is like. Life is not always love and light. It's not always positive vibes. And to numb out or to turn away or to put your fingers in your ears and say, la, 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 I'm only going to my happy place, you're not allowing some real healing to take place. I have found, and I often say to people, the times we grow the most is when we are dealing with some heavy stuff.
Yes.
When things are going great, we're not growing, we're having a good time. But boy, you put us in some hot water, it's like
you figure things out quickly.
Yeah, you see how strong you really are. So I've really, the hard times of my life, the shadow stuff, that work, that's the stuff that's really made me who I am today.
Yeah, it really does show you who you are. And I think when we look at the shadow and the light, this is really a holistic approach. Whereas if you're only looking at the light, the love, the light, the good, you're only seeing half of it. And how can you make a really strong, clear, deliberate choice about who you are and what you want out of life if you're not willing to look at all of it?
Well, that's it. I mean, like you said, the duality is there. You can't have one without the other. The light, the dark, the night, the day. And so you have to embrace it all completely. Otherwise, as you said, you're just working halfway, and not a good way to go. And Theresa, you you saw that question in the chat room from CC about considering reverse card as a shadow. Let's talk about that a little bit, because card reversals in the tarot are very kind of personal. Some people say yes, some people say no, some people say it doesn't matter, whatever. So, but that's a really good question to address. So take it away.
Sure. Well, first of all, with reversals are always a matter of preference. I've always worked with reversals. When I started out reading many years ago, there were very few books on tarot, and they had reversals, so I assumed you had to work with them. I didn't know there was an alternative. It wasn't until I came to the internet that I discovered, wow, a whole bunch of people don't use reversals. So I really found that you don't need them to be a good reader. So for people who are listening, if you don't want to work with reversals, that's fine. But as far as reversals being shadow energy, I don't see that. I see reversals, they show maybe blocked energy, or they might show a different perspective. But I believe every card has a shadow and a light. There are, what I like to say, even though I love the Sun card, it's my favorite card because it is so joyful. But even that card has a shadow side. And I do an exercise with students called good card, bad card, kind of like good cop, bad cop. And if you look at the Sun, what is, right away we see all that positivity, right? But there can be a shadow to that too. I mean, sometimes, like, for example, if you are one of those love and light people, that's actually shadow work. That can be denial. That can be a refusal to look at the really important heavy stuff. That's the shadow side of the Sun. Now, if we use a card like the Devil, which is the ultimate shadow card, in my opinion, I mean, we look at the Devil, we're like, yikes.
It's one of my favorite cards.
Yeah.
I love all the shadow cards.
Because it's dark and heavy, but what is the light side of that? Well, if you look at the figures in the Devil card, they have very, very loose chains that you, no matter what situation you get into, there's always a way out. That's a reminder, the light of the Devil card. So if you go through every card in the deck and use this as an exercise, look for the light, look for the shadow in every card, you're going to open your mind up to a whole lot of new perspectives.
And go ahead. No, go.
I was going to say, well, a simple way of doing this really is just asking yourself, how would I use this energy or use the meaning of this card? I mean, thinking about it this way, what would be a positive way of using the Ace of Swords versus a shadowy or negative? You know, and you get a really clear picture with that, because if you think about, well, how does a sword function? It could be to protect yourself, or it could be to hurt someone, you know? So it really isn't about necessarily good or bad, which is the good cop, bad cop exercise. It's just about the intention and how you're using that energy or expressing that energy.
Yeah, and if you look at the cards long enough, you will see that. While you guys are talking, the Tower card popped into my mind. And so many people are dead scared of that, you know. I mean, they look at the pictures, the illustrations and everything. But, okay, so it is a big change. It's a major change. You're going to get rid of everything you don't need, you know, and it's going to be sudden. But it's happening because maybe you're not taking those steps. So the universe is doing it for you. And it really is a good thing to clean house and get rid of garbage and stuff. So, yeah, I think every card, good and bad, has both sides. And that's a really good exercise to do. So any of you that are tarot people, try that. Because, yeah, you have to see both sides of it all. Really important. All right. Now, one thing that you talk about is being present and grounding ourselves in the moment. You know, very, very important. Some people may not understand what being present is and how we ground ourselves. So let's touch on that for a minute.
Sure. Well, you know, I'm also a yoga teacher. I've been doing yoga. Yeah, I've been doing yoga for a long time, probably about 20 years now, and teaching it for about 15 years. And one of the things I like to say for most of us is, and I'll use yoga as an analogy, we tend to never be in the present moment. We're either thinking about the past or we're thinking about the future. And one of the things that we learn in yoga is when you're in a yoga pose, you have to be in that moment. You're holding that pose. There is nowhere else to go but right there in that pose. And when you are in the present moment in your life, that's when magic happens. Because when you're in the present moment, then you're able to really see where you are, how you're feeling, how your body's feeling, and then you can make conscious decisions. The present moment is really important because oftentimes we're not in that moment. And then we wonder years later, well, how did I get into this position? Why has my life turned out like this? Well, if you go back and look at your life, you'll see that oftentimes the decisions you've been making haven't really truly been conscious. So being in the present moment is so important so that you are living your life fully and also thinking very mindfully about the decisions you're making that might impact yourself or others in the future. You know, I always say in yoga, I said, if you want to get in the present moment, get injured. Once you're injured, you can do nothing else but think about that injury. We don't have to get to an injury to get in the present moment. Just be in that moment all the time, and your life will be magic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I always think about when someone comes for a reading and say you use a simple spread like past, present, and future. And people are always like, well, let's just skip to the future stuff. I want to look at that. And it's like, well, that is going to be so much more dependent on what's happening right now, that if you actually are in this present moment, you look at where you're at, you look at how you're using your actions, your intention, your energy, then the future sort of falls in line with that. So, but people, we want to get out of pain, get out of whatever we're in right now and on to the next best thing. But really the magic is right here, right now. That's, again, going back to that idea of looking at things holistically. You have to see all the options in order to make an informed decision.
And I also want to add one more thing to that, too. Oh. I think that, oftentimes when people come to a tarot reading, they just want to know the future because that's what they assume a reading is all about. Like you're just going to have the future spelled out for you. You don't have to think or lift a finger, that everything is just going to happen to you or for you. But life isn't like that. Life happens because of you. And so a tarot reading can show you the potential from where you are now and where your decisions may be leading you. But it's not a passive act. Life is not passive. You have to take that information and then think about, well, what am I going to do now with that information to really create the life that I want? That's where the magic is again.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's what this book is all about. It's all about putting the power back into your hands. It really is about self-empowerment, because if you aren't choosing from yourself or doing things from your own center, then you're going to feel out of control. Life's going to knock you, every direction. So that really is the magic of it.
And that's kind of where grounding comes in too, right?
Yeah. It's a flip in perspective.
So everybody has different ways of grounding. It's be the tree and feel your roots going into the ground barefoot. If somebody says, well, how do I ground myself? What's the best way? There may not be a best way, but what do you guys usually say?
Shaheen, what's your favorite? You can start.
Well, my favorite thing to ground myself is to ask myself questions. How do I feel right now? What's going on around me right now? What do I see in this room right now? When you start to ask yourself questions, you have to be present, you have to be grounded in order to respond to them. And there's this very basic way of sort of dealing with anxiety, and it's that you look for 3 things that you can see, 3 things that you can smell, 3 things that you can hear, and you just name them. And that makes you become very present. So when you're present, that's going to ground you immediately. And I think one of our favorite spreads in the book is the body, mind, spirit spread. And I think that's another way of grounding. So those are my 2 things that I would go to.
And for me, breath work is really important because breath work is one way that I can really get into the moment right now. And I work with that a lot with my yoga students. And it's simply right now in this moment, you sit up or lie down, whatever is most comfortable, and you begin paying attention to your breathing. Mm-hmm. And just notice the breath. It's not like you're trying to control it. You're not judging it. You just notice every breath. How does it feel in my body? Is my breath, is it rough? Is it even? Are my breaths short? How am I breathing? So that's one way. I also, like Shaheen, we put this in the book for a reason. The Body, Mind, Spirit Tarot Spread is one that I use all the time to check in with myself, especially when things are not going well. Then it's like, okay, Theresa, you're stressing out. Let's do the spread. Let's see what's going on here. Let's check in and see what you need. So those are 2 ways that I love to get grounded: breath work and a little tarot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's. I think people's minds now are just so scattered. We just have too much on our minds on a daily basis, and I think the human race likes to shoot themselves in the foot and overdo and overcompensate and over everything at times, keeping busy to not think of other things. So, being present and grounding is really, really important. So
let's add overcomplicate in there too.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes. There's a lot of overs, but it's like the clairs, clairaudient, clairsentient,
Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah. But yeah, overcomplicating is something that we do best of all. I'm going to throw you one more thing because you were talking about it in chat, and there's going to be 10 times more people listening to the podcast. So there was a question, Shaheen, that you answered about the decks being personal. Let's talk about that because it was an interesting conversation. I was reading along, so I think we could share it with everybody.
Yeah, so someone asked what deck they need to work with for doing shadow work. And, in the book, we use the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith imagery, but I feel that when you're using tarot for anything, you should really find a deck that resonates with you. So if you're really wanting to dive into deep shadow work, you might have a specific deck that feels more shadowy to you. Maybe it's using a deck that has colors that are more dark and moody. And so you might find that certain images are going to speak to you better, or certain decks are going to speak to you in different ways. And I know when I work with clients specifically, I will choose decks sometimes in that way. It's like this deck really resonates with this person. I can just feel this energy links together. So it is really a matter of personal preference. When you're doing the spreads, when you're doing the exercises in the book, you can use whatever deck calls to you. But we use the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith deck in the book.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, we've got lots more to talk about, but we've got to take a quick break. So Shaheen and Theresa will be with us pretty soon. 2 minutes. Hang in there.
Stirring the Cauldron will be right back, so don't go away. If you end up with webbed feet, remember, you've been warned.
Hi there. My name is Yenta, and I'm a paraholic. Being a paraholic has affected my whole life. Ooh, just thinking about it makes me so hot. Nothing gets me going like exploring the supernatural, metaphysical, paranormal, and especially the stories of those big hairy beasts known as Bigfoot. You know what's utterly satisfying but always leaves me wanting, craving more? I love listening to the Journey Radio Show on Wednesday nights. You see, my curiosity is insatiable. Curiosity hasn't killed my cat. Not yet, anyway. My name is Yenta, and I'm proud to be a paraholic. Won't you join me? Discover the paraholic within you, and together we'll release the Kraken, baby. Tune in to the Journey Radio Show at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 Central, right here on the ParaX Radio Network.
This is New Aeon Now. News and discussion of the metaphysical, the occult, the paranormal, and much, much more. With your hosts, New Aeon High Priestess, Reverend Lily Alley, artist, occultist, and paranormal team leader, Tamara Ortiz, and head of the Draken chapter of the Order of Paranormal Exploration, Christine Matza. The New Aeon is now. Join us every Thursday night at 10 p.m. Eastern for New Aeon Now.
Welcome back to Stirring the Cauldron. Once again, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
And like the man said, welcome back. And for those of you who might have tuned in late, my guests are Shaheen Miro and Theresa Reed. They're the authors of the book Tarot for Troubled Times. And jumping back in, I was going to kind of just throw out things that caught my eye when I was going through the book. And one of them was energetic cords. Where do we find them, and what can we use them for?
Theresa, do you want to go?
Actually, why don't you address that one? I think that you're more eloquent with your way of expressing that, Shaheen.
Oh, my goodness. Well, the first thing that I would say about energetic cords is it really comes down to communication. So I always tell people, when we're communicating, like the three of us right now, we have an energetic cord that is connecting us because it's a way that we transfer energy. And so that first level of communication is happening energetically. And then all the other ways come after that. So what happens is an energetic cord, when it becomes a negative thing, it's that the cord has outlived its purpose. It's sort of like you have a really a staticky phone line, and you're trying to talk on it rather than hanging up and calling back, or, waiting a few minutes to call back. And so it becomes this sort of pipeline where energy is being either siphoned off, taken away from you, or you're pulling on other people's energy and you're taking it on without knowing it. And I know everybody who is listening to this, and I know the two of you understand this completely, but when you feel one thing from a person, but they're saying another, and there's this incongruence that's happening, it's because energetically you're getting something, but their words are not matching up. And so energetic cords are really helpful to understand, because so many of us feel down, we feel depressed, we feel depleted, we feel lethargic, and we don't know why. And oftentimes it's because we are energetically being pulled in a million different directions. Imagine if you had, again, thinking of this idea of being on the phone, imagine if your phone could be on, a 100-way call with everybody you've met throughout the week, and you've never hung up, and they're talking to you while you're in bed or something. It's like, that would be very unnerving, and that's what's happening energetically. So that's my spiel about it. I don't know if I answered the question, but
I think you answered it very eloquently. And the one thing I will say is I think a lot of people are not aware. I just want to add this. They're not aware of those energetic cords. Now, I'm very sensitive. And so from a very early age in life, and Shaheen, you're the same way too. We were really aware of our own energy and the energy of others. And, and I'm very conscious when I connect with somebody, I can always tell immediately whether that connection is good or whether it's going to be problematic. I don't ignore that. And a lot of times we do ignore it because you know what it is? It's like we don't want to be judgmental if we feel like a not so great vibe, or, we color it with maybe past experiences, but we're always connecting energetically to people, and some of us are just more aware of it.
Well, and I would like to add, just going back to when we were talking about grounding, this is where asking yourself questions and doing breath work is so helpful. Oftentimes we don't really connect with our bodies, and our bodies are barometers. I mean, they're picking up on energy because, that's where the energy is going in and out of. So if you, walk into a store and you're in the line, to check out, and suddenly your leg hurts, or you feel like you just feel off in some way, stopping and asking yourself, did I feel this way a few minutes ago? Or why do I feel this way? Just checking in and listening that there's been a shift, you can start to get more information. Because I think it's that not everyone is used to acknowledging it, but I think we're all sensing it on some level. And so when we start to really go deeper into it, I mean, so much more information comes out.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to jump to psychic vampires. We'll talk about a transition. And I think most people identify them as a particular person, but correct me if I'm wrong. It's not just people that are psychic vampires. It can also be things going on in the world around us, negative situations or bad weather or natural disasters, people's bad moods, and even just turning on the news every day. Isn't that kind of considered kind of psychic vampire-ish?
Well, let me tell you, for me it is. I actually had to stop watching the news because what was happening for me, even if I would watch, newscasters that I liked, they would bring their own sense of urgency and panic into the way they would relay the news. And I found myself starting to get into this weird state of quiet desperation, where suddenly I'm feeling like this urgency and this panicky sense of, foreboding. And I don't like feeling like that. And one day I realized, oh my God, you need to stop watching the news. And so I stopped watching it and I started reading it instead. And I do limit how much I read, but I read the news because that way I'm not putting someone else's voice and energy into it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I can't watch. I cannot watch it. I mean, I'm very, very sensitive to it. And my husband and I both found that we feel a lot better when we don't watch the news. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And the other thing I want to say about psychic vampires that I think is a little different than the way people perceive it is that it's not necessarily a scary thing or a negative thing. I mean, it is negative in the sense that someone's being depleted, but that's why in the book we talk about two different types of psychic vampires that will come in the form of people, or it could be situations. And there's the manipulator, which is like the suave, charming, gaslighting sort of person. And then there's the martyr. And that's the person that, comes in and they unload on you, or, they call you and they talk to you for 3 hours about their problems. I'm sorry, it's storming here.
Damn. I love that.
You mentioned the tower. When you said that earlier, there was a strike of lightning and I could see the mountains because I'm in Colorado right now.
Hey, timing is everything.
I know. So, but a lot of times when we think of those people, for example, this could be, your sister or your brother or your mom who calls you on the phone and unloads on you and talks about, everything under the sun except for you, and you feel like someone has just sucked all your energy away. That's a psychic vampire situation. But a lot of times we don't really think of that because we think, oh, I love my mom, or I love my sister, or this person needs me to listen to them. And so it's not like there's this malevolence about it, but it is still draining you of energy.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of amazing, that people are so affected by other people. And, you don't have to be empathic to do that either. I mean, you can tell somebody's walking next to you down the street. You almost feel that cold chill if he's really, angry or whatever.
Yeah.
And
I sometimes, people get too close to me when I'm like walking out in public and I can just feel, and I'm like, oh, I need you to just step 2 steps that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you kind of learn that dance, that little side step is to stay out of harm's way. I know. So, there are a lot of exercises throughout the book, including spiritual protection, visualizations, and ultraviolet light visualizations. But you also brought up visualizing a cloak of black velvet. And while some people might think of that as something really dark and dastardly, it's not. I mean, witches have been wearing black for years, and not because it's slimming, although that helps, but, black bounces negativity away from you. It doesn't bring it on you. It's not like a black cloud over your head. So tell me about the black cloak visualization and why it's something that's very good.
Well, this is something Shaheen added to the book, so I think Shaheen should definitely talk about this one.
Yeah, well, so what you said, witches and mystics have been using black since the beginning of time, and it is a color that evokes mystery and darkness, but it's not a scary color. The reason why it is so powerful is black is, it absorbs light, it absorbs things, but it neutralizes it at the same time. And honestly, when I started working with this visualization, in a lot of ways, it really sank in for me when I started watching how my cat moves through the world. And he is this big, fat, wild black cat. And, think about next time you watch a cat, especially a black cat, how that camouflage allows them to move in and out of spaces undetected and unaffected. And so that's what this visualization does. Whereas when you visualize white light, you're sort of turning yourself into this torch that everything can see. But sometimes we want to become a little bit invisible. We want the energies to be absorbed so we're not affected by them. And I think that this is why a lot of artists, a lot of musicians, a lot of people who are magic makers use black, in their wardrobe. I think even if it's an unconscious thing, they're sensing that this color is protective in nature.
Mm-hmm. It's protective, but one of the reasons why I wear all black also when I work with, I work with because I'm goth too, but I wear all black because I never want the focus to be on me. I always want the focus to be on the other person. If I'm wearing some outlandish outfit with all kinds of ruffles and flowers and pink and all of that, I think it's very distracting. And so I find wearing very simple black clothing also when I'm doing my work really takes all of the energy off of me, because for tarot, as a tarot reader, it's never about me, the reader, and my ability and skill. It's about the client and empowering them. So the last thing they need is to be distracted by me in some glitzy outfit.
Well, I'm just going to say that black comes in ruffles too.
Not my wardrobe.
I'm just joking. But I agree with you. I agree. Like, it just becomes an open space where, that energy is just, it just moves. You're not the focus, and you're also not hit by it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I don't like when people think black is bad, because they look at us and as a witch. I mean, they think, oh, she's evil, she's wearing black. Well, no, I'm not. Well,
I've actually got yelled at in yoga classes for wearing black.
See, people do that. It's like who died? Where's the funeral? I mean, all kinds of stuff.
Your bad vibes are dying. That's who died.
It's too funny. It really is. All right, let's jump into something else. Part 2 is where you get into the cards themselves, the archetypes of the major arcana, their positive side, their shadows, their actions, affirmations, the 4 elements, and the suits of the tarot, as well as the aspects of the minor arcana. Just a great deal of comprehensive information that will enable the reader to familiarize themselves with the cards, using them to heal, finding their birth cards and their year cards, which you don't hear too much about, but I have a friend that talks about those all the time. You talk about the spreads and how to work with them. And like I said before, none of this reads like a textbook. I mean, it's so user-friendly to both seasoned readers and to novices. Really, really interesting. So,
our goal was to make it so that it would be user-friendly.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't want to, I think I like to say we like to bring mystical subjects down to earth so that people really can feel comfortable with them and not intimidated. And we were really hoping that our section on tarot would be something that could help any reader, no matter what their skill level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, I don't remember if someone asked us this when we were doing a book signing or workshop, but I remember someone brought up, why didn't all of the ceremonies and practices include tarot specifically? And I think part of the reason why we didn't make every single thing tarot or make it tarot-centric was because of that. We didn't want people to feel intimidated or feel like they had to take this crash course, and get a master's degree in tarot before they could start doing this work and integrating it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it was really, really interesting. I mean, there are little things that you find in there that you're not even looking for, but you go, oh, wow, this is very cool. I like this, kind of stuff. So it's really interesting whether you know the tarot or not. It's really an interesting book. So there.
We love that.
Now, of course, chapter 7, Believe in Magic, caught my eye. And it's a great chapter on what magic is, how to create it, how to use it. You talk about candle magic, colors, rituals, jar spells. Now, someone is sitting there listening to the show right now and thinking, how does magic figure in with the tarot? So I'm going to toss that over to you guys.
Well, Shaheen, you want to start that out?
Well, yes, I will. And the way that I like to explain to people why magic and tarot go so well together is because when we're doing a reading, regardless of whether you're using tarot or you're working psychically, but when you're doing a reading for someone, you're looking at their energetic story. And your energetic story it's an amalgamation of all of these things we've been talking about, the light, the shadow. It's an amalgamation of your thoughts, your ideas, your beliefs about the world and how it responds to you. And so when we understand what that energetic story is, through all of these practices that we're talking about, then we can start to shift that energy. And what better way to shift energy and to work with intention than ceremony and magic? And I think this is powerful because we are combining all of these different levels of awareness. We're using things that we can see, that we can touch, that we can smell, that we can interact with. And that's why I think magic is so fundamental to humans. It's not a religious thing. It doesn't belong to any specific tradition. It's us expressing, like art, whatever it is that we want to move through us and into our lives.
And the other thing that I would like to add too to that is that sometimes too when people, get a tarot reading, or maybe if they're working on one of the tarot spreads in the book, they might feel then, well, what can I do energetically to help move things along? And doing magic can oftentimes be kind of like a little prescription. That's something you can do to help your situation, yes. Whether it's like a ritual bath, whether it's lighting a candle, whether it's sitting in meditation and thinking about your intention. That can be something to really help work with the energy that shows up at your reading. I mean, everything's made out of energy, so why not work with the energy too?
And that's something I love about with tarot specifically, and we talk a little bit about this in the book. When you look at the structure of the minor arcana cards, we have the 4 elements, and right there we see 4 different types of energy we can work with. So I always tell people, so in a reading, you're asking, well, how do I get the job that I want? What can I do? And you pull the Ace of Wands. I might say, well, you know what? You might need to work with the energy of fire. Light a candle with your intention and help ignite that into your life. And so there's another way of pulling ceremony and ritual and magic into the tarot reading that you're doing for yourself.
Mm-hmm. And the disclaimer is, if you do a little magic, it doesn't mean that you're going to be a witch for the rest of your life. Right?
Exactly.
But that's not a bad thing either.
Well, no. I'm not one to speak. But, but people get a little bit dicey about that. Well, if I say this or if I do this that witches do, is that going to make me one? And so, that's why we're here, to talk about things like that and alleviate the misconceptions and the fears. I mean, we're all human.
I grew up Catholic. And what were Catholics doing? We were always like lighting candles to this saint or that saint to do this thing or that thing for us. Yes. What is that? I mean, think about that for a second. When you lose something, you go to St. Anthony. When you want to sell a house, you bury St. Joe upside down by the for sale sign. I mean, yes. That is,
this is why I love Catholicism. And I grew up, my mom would take me out under the full moon and we would light candles and talk to the goddess. And the whole time I'm thinking, I want to go to Catholic school with my friend down the street because they have goddesses and people and we can light candles. It's everywhere. It's all the time. But of course I didn't have all the other stuff that came with it.
Well, you've got the thunder and lightning. Yeah, you're magically bringing all this wonderful thunder and lightning, so this is good. You are very magical. And so everybody that's in the chat room, I think, is smiling. I'm really smiling. I'm wishing I was there. So we're getting pretty close to running out of time. So I think it's about time for you to tell people where they can find the book. Anything else interesting that you have to throw out there?
Well, people, you can find the book at any fine retailer. Online, you can find it at Barnes & Noble, Goodreads, IndieBound Books, Amazon, Books A Million, all the big places. You can also find them at your local metaphysical stores. So be sure, of course, to visit your local shops. And, if they don't have it in the shelves, you can always say, hey, I would like to order Tarot for Troubled Times. And yes. Some people are even having them in their library. So you may even want to ask your library to stock a copy of it. So you can find it pretty much anywhere. Anywhere else, Shaheen, that I didn't cover there?
I think you covered all the places. I mean, it's at all the major retailers. And I do highly recommend, if you have a favorite independent bookstore, or metaphysical shop, and they don't have the book and you want it, ask them. Most independent bookstores will order it and you don't have to pay for shipping and you just pick it up there. And your library will usually, if a book is requested, they'll order it as well. I had one lady who emailed me and told me she was number 10 on the list to get the book at her library. So, let people know, because once people see that it's there, then, it shares that even more. So always ask.
Yes, and support the independent retailers, because they're the ones that struggle and they're in it for the right reasons. So it's very important that we do that. Mm-hmm. So where can people find both of you?
Well, you can find me at, my website is thetarotlady.com, and I am all over social media. I'm a typical Gemini. I love social media. So you can find me on Twitter, which is my favorite social media place. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram, and my handle is always The Tarot Lady. I also have the Tarot Bites and Astrology Bites podcast. So, I'm all over the place.
And where can they find the podcast?
They can find Astrology Bites or Tarot Bites on iTunes, on Stitcher, and on Google Play.
Cool. All right.
And you can find me at ShaheenMiroInsights.com, and there you can read things that I write. You can check out things about the Lunar Nomad Oracle and private readings, and you can also find me all over social media. I love Instagram, and so if you look up Shaheen Miro, my handle is Shaheen the Dream, but you can find me there. And I love connecting with people and just sharing, all sorts of inspiring things. So find me there.
Good. Well, again, thank you for joining me tonight, and really, again, for the lovely thunder and lightning background. You get brownie points for that one. Seriously.
Yay! I was worried.
No, okay. There's one thing that doesn't bother us ever: lightning storms, thunder, or animals in the background. So we're good.
I had a cat meowing earlier, but I don't think you heard that.
Somebody accused me of it being mine, but I said not this time. But no, it's fine. Animals and thunder. That's good. That'll work. And I want to thank everybody for being here tonight, whether you're here or maybe listening to the podcast after a while. So thank you all for listening in. And until next time, as always, blessed be and merry meet again. Good night.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Please join us again next week at the same time for another great guest and more cauldron stirring. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2019. The Mysterioso March by Kevin MacLeod is licensed through Incompetech.com.